the B-1 mishap report came out. And if you want the entire, it's the longest mishap report I've ever done because it's the longest mishap report I've ever read. It read like someone very angry and who was very upset and disappointed. And I thought we would talk about the leadership aspect because it's the first time I've ever seen, and I haven't done them all. I mean, I've heard the ZAR 52 one's pretty bad and, you know, some of the other ones, but it's the first one I've ever read non-fatality where it is multiple pages going after like command climate, leadership, vacuums, all kind of other stuff aside from what happened. If you want
like witch hunt.
Yeah, if you want the full mishap report, and even then it's a 51-minute video, and I still cut out I cut out the part about they were illegal, the NIF, and they had legally been met up, even though they weren't supposed to. Like, there's a lot of stuff I cut out because I was like, dude, I just don't have time for all this. But
wait, so they were med down?
Legally, yes. They were supposed to have been deniffed.
I don't understand the legally. Like, that's a pretty black and white, isn't it?
All right,
I mean,
well,
you're either medically cleared to fly or not.
So they were not.
I'm sorry. I go back to my previous comment of zero prep.
No, dude, this is a long one. I mean, I read through it and it's there's a lot of stuff.
Dude, hold on, I'm gonna find it because qualifications. So they were all medically qualified per documentation. It's very specific language. But administrative discrepancies were noted for 2 mishap formation crew members who received medical care without a documented aeromedical disposition or approved aviation waiver for conditions not meeting flying standards. This should have resulted in a status of duties not including flying before the mishap. They're required to notify flight medicine of all off-base medical care, and such members are administratively placed in DNIF status until an aeromedical provider has adjudicated all care and makes a disposition. Failure to attend directed follow-on care may result in a duty limitation or DNIF status. So that's one thing. They don't name who. And then a mishap maintenance worker was there. So that's what I'm talking about. So
okay, and again, I apologize because I really should have spent the time.
So he
talk to me like I'm stupid. Like, what does that mean in language?
All right, so I got it. So
allegedly,
you were met up, right? You're full up around. You've got your 2992 because I think the Air Force and Navy both do that now. I don't know what that means. You go and it's your upchit. You go to your civilian doc and you're like, hey doc, you want to take a look at this? And you don't report it to your flight doc. You went to town and got your civilian doc to look at something, but you didn't go report it to flight medicine. And that was grounding because you were supposed to report that
regardless of what it is.
Give them an opportunity.
I have a hangnail doc, so there's no and again, I'm seriously being 100% serious here.
Dude, it's like you have an upchip and then you take...
kidding. Like, regardless of what I go see my flight doc, there's no gray area. It's like you went in there, you have to come to the flight doc and go, I had a hangnail.
You saw a medical provider for something.
Okay.
You need to go check in with your flight medicine people.
Fun fact, never had a civilian flight doc or a civilian doc when I was in the military. So
most people in the military don't. This is an active duty base. But in this case, 2 mishap formation crew members, and they say mishap formation crew members, which could be the other jet. Like, they don't actually say.
They don't say who's who in the zoo.
Who did what in this case.
Okay. Well, that's not ideal. But I'll devil's advocate that and say, like, maybe it was for something dumb.
You're on a tangent, Wombat. We're not even talking about that.
Sorry. I'm excited to be on the show.
We're not even on that now.
Hey, it's my mom's birthday, by the way. Segue. Happy birthday, Mom. Anyway, seriously, go ahead. Sorry.
So anyway, the statement of opinion was, I've written language like this in writing before, and I was angry when I wrote it at certain leaders. So I understand, but I've never written something that was going to be public like this because it's very scathing, and I've never seen one that's this scathing and this pointed as far as the board president just rolling in and crushing everybody. So yeah, in case you don't know, the big picture, they didn't fly the plane. Right. The weather was bad. Ice fog had rolled in. They had a little bit of a wind shift and he pushed the throttle up, he reduced the throttle and left it there 3 times, got in the backside of the power curve, got a 2,000 foot a minute descent rate, got a full dot low, and none of the 4 people in the airplane caught it until the tail struck. And the IP says climb, 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 and they don't do anything at first. And he says climb again, and he lights the afterburner. They hit the approach lights, and then end up skidding for 5,000 feet as they eject. So it's an airmanship thing. The other cause was something that I think that both the FAA and the Defense Department do poorly, which was NOTAM management, because there had been a NOTAM, what used to be called Notice to Airmen. Now it's called Notice to Air Missions. There was a NOTAM that was standing for a very long time that said that the centerline paint, the reflective paint, was worn down. And so as a result of that, they increased your minimums by like a half mile. I think it was like a half mile to 5/8 or something like that. The minimums increased because it's like you break out, you can't see it.
Can't see what you're seeing. That makes sense. Okay.
Well, that NOTAM was buried in the NOTAMs, and so no one was ever briefing that. It wasn't as part of their step brief. That's another thing that's different, Wombat. Imagine, if you will, your ODO has to give you a brief before you go fly.
This corporation you worked for sounds amazing, to be honest with you. But,
so you get
I understand what you're saying, because I remember that from Vance. Like
you get multiple briefs and multiple opportunities. You get your formation brief, you get your crew brief, you get your step brief.
And this NOTAM was just missed by everybody.
These guys briefed a little bit in the van. Like they're just, there's all kinds of briefings, but they never once, the slide that had the one thing they needed to brief was hidden. So nobody briefed that they needed to increase their minimums for this approach. So the jet breaks, it's 4 hours from the time that they step to the time they actually take off, because the jet breaks, it's cold. They go back inside, they wait for maintenance to fix it. They go back out, they take off. Their flight lead is already like, okay, we're done. Let's go back. They have 80,000 pounds of fuel, and their alternate is Tinker. So they come back and they're like,
sorry, stupid question. Where are they out of?
South Dakota, Ellsworth.
That's a pretty far alternate.
Well, it's a B-1.
Yeah.
So you might as well be flying, big old airplane, because they work.
Yeah.
And so they don't divert. They both formations shoot this approach. The first formation lands uneventfully, even though tower can't see them at all because the visibility is like 5/8 of a mile.
Nice.
They were both illegal on the approach.
I like that.
And
he sent
all 4 people in this aircraft missed the fact that they got an 1,800 foot a minute descent rate. They were 15 knots slow, like 152 knots, and they were supposed to be 164, so 12 knots slow, I guess. And the engines were spooled down, and they were full dot low and didn't see the runway. They were looking at
the weather changed from the first to the second, didn't it? Sorry,
no.
We're getting bad weather here.
No.
Same weather? Oh, okay.
First jet lands under the same conditions that the second jet attempted to land.
So you could infer, which we don't like to do, but you can infer that if the second plane was on glide slope,
they would have had the same results.
It would have likely landed.
If
that sucks,
yes.
Man. That sucks.
However, and the first one got the same, they call it's wind shear, performance enhancing wind shear, right? They got a 12 knot increase in performance. So added 12 knots of gust essentially. And then that ended up swinging to a crosswind. So, but he just kept the power like back.
He was, it was, I got you.
So
I could see it, honestly. Gonky, you've done Hornet 1 approaches into Lemoore with the fog. I guarantee it, back in the day. Like, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to say you did, but so I could see, okay.
But they don't have a HUD. They don't have a coupled, he's hand flying this and not doing a great job of it. He's only flown twice in 60 days.
Bingo.
That was my next question.
Bingo.
Yep.
None of these people have a whole lot of currency.
Yeah.
So
keep cutting your military hours there.
In the cause, they go after the Wizzos in the back, because the one guy, his altimeter was broken, showing 1,000 feet high. They blame the pilot for not briefing the Wizzo what the VVI was supposed to be, the vertical velocities. Like, well, you didn't tell him, I'm like 750 feet a minute. If you don't see 750 feet a minute, and
I'll debunk that a little bit. Like, how long has this dude been a Wizzo? Right? Like, it's not his first time seeing it.
Well, it's
right?
Part of their,
he should have an idea.
It's part of their brief. But anyway, so there's that. One of the Wizzos wasn't wearing gloves. They got him on that. And then they went like culturally, they're like, nobody wears gloves. And then I think one of them, Gonky, was one of them not wearing a helmet.
Yeah, I thought I remember reading that. Yeah.
And then the IP
that felt dope on the ejection.
Was at his last medical 245 pounds, but they weighed him after in the hospital because he hurt himself, and he was 265 pounds.
Outside the seat.
Outside the seat limitations, which is why he hurt himself.
Yeah, they left no stone unturned on this one.
But anyway, that's not even like that's just the flying part. I'm okay with that. I've seen that. And it's not that I'm not okay with this, but I've never seen when they go to substantially contributing factors. Yep, they do the, the CRM stuff. That's great. But they go after the supervision program because of the supervisor of flying didn't highlight the airfield status and hazards, including the NOTAM.
And that's the ODO, right? That's the
ODO.
Okay.
Well, so in the Air Force, you get a top 3 and you get a SOF. And so typically the SOF either is in like a truck or in the tower. Everywhere I've been, like they were in a tower at Eglin, weren't they, Gonky?
Yep.
Yeah, they were in the tower.
Were these the dudes that would watch me to make sure I don't land gear up advance?
No, dude, we didn't have a SOF in the Navy.
That's RSU.
That's right, RSU.
SOF is the group commander's direct representative. And they're the one that's like, bird condition, airfield status, weather recall, like they're making the big picture decision. Top 3 is your squadron
SDO.
Level
SDO.
Yeah, ODO. Okay. That's actually more of the ODO. The squadron level, liaising with maintenance, making sure that the right people are qualified in the right jets and who's the priority. And, you're like the squadron commander running the ops desk, essentially.
Okay.
And,
so, SDO running the ops, the schedule.
The SOF would be your book reader. Well, in this case, they were kind of doing Navy ops because they had, if they were mid-manned, they could combine the positions into one. But the problem was, if they did that, there was like a little bitty window at the ops desk, like far where you couldn't see outside. So this person is giving recommendations based off not being able to look out the window and say, well, it's foggy, I can't see anything. So, but they also gave bad recommendations based on the NOTAM, which is funny. I'm surprised they're not changing this because Notice to Airman's been changed to Notice to Air Mission. So, but a little bit of sticking it to the man in the report there.
Yeah, I like it.
But anyway, so they had a bad changeover and the dude wasn't qualified. So you have a currency to be the SOF and they had no way of tracking it. And they had no way of knowing that the person was out of currency, which SOF, I mean, what is the currency? Okay, I can read the book, like.
Maybe he was out of currency for the plane. Would that disqualify him for currency for SOF? I don't know.
No.
Okay.
No. But anyway.
I'm trying to be a positive ray of light here and be a devil's advocate that maybe.
No, there isn't, dude. There's not much here.
Then there was this other thing that the weather sensors had been out for a long time. Nobody knew about it. It was a whole thing when they flipped the runway around, because that was the other thing too, is they were landing opposite direction. They were actually on runway 31, and when they flipped the runway around, the sensor started showing that there was no data. They're like, oh, well, there's no data here.
Must be fine.
So they didn't even know if they were flying legally or not. But then, so this is where final contributing factor and conclusion. See how many pages this is? This is the part that becomes unusual. The investigation has shown that many failures leading to this mishap were not a one-time occurrence or an aberration. I have noted that the mishap occurred due to numerous factors, including a culture of noncompliance, widespread deviation from established policy and procedure, and several organizational influences and preconditions. Like this dude writes a dissertation. Sorry, this dude, sir, writes a dissertation.
Or dudette. We don't know.
No, it's definitely a dude. It's Colonel Eric D. Lord.
Oh, that's
his name on it. Yeah.
That's a great last name.
Writes a dissertation on the fact that this is it says the 34th Bomb Squadron's lack of effective flying operations supervision, the 28th Operational Support Squadron's failure to communicate airfield and weather capabilities and conditions all speak to culture and leadership issues. After the board's extensive investigation, I conclude the human factors causing and contributing to the mishap were not an aberration. Instead, they reflect broader trends within the two organizations that I just mentioned. They lack proper supervision, which set the conditions for individual causal acts in the overall mishap circumstances and events. I find by the preponderance of the evidence that these leadership and climate issues directly contributed to the mishap. And then he just goes on. Like, I mean, this is like Fox 3, like every,
well, not for a bomber guy. J-Dan.
Well, whatever.
J-Dan.
Like pickle, whatever they say. Yeah. Throughout the investigation, they found unsatisfactory levels of basic airmanship, an inadequate focus on foundational governing directive knowledge, and an overall lack of discipline throughout the entire squadron. Throughout 16 interviews with squadron assigned and attached aviators, I discovered improper understanding of 11.202. This guy went down and quizzed everybody. And
dude, I bet it is a hoot to be at that squadron right now.
Dude.
Nobody knew about none of the 8 felon members knew that you have to raise the density altitude or the decision altitude when it's cold. Nobody knew about the landing restriction in the NOTAM. The squadron commander said he knew about the NOTAM, but he said it probably is not a big deal. They testified they flew their missions without briefing or knowledge of the NOTAM. Like, he went off. But then he said, okay, the Wizzos weren't wearing gloves. And then the Dizzo freely admitted that in the seconds leading up to the mishap, he was on his after landing checklist. He's like, I'm out. See you guys later. I'm thinking about
in his defense, he had landed. So we've all worked with Wizzo types.
That's true. When the tail touched the ground, we have landed.
Yeah. So again, trying to play devil's advocate.
Then he fat shamed the big guy, which I honestly, dude, you're in the military. I'm sorry. What are you going to do if you got to evade? I mean,
well, dude, no, you know what? As the big guy, I'm going to make a comment on this.
Yeah, but you fixed it.
Yeah. No, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. We're not fat shaming me either, dude, or else we are going to feud. That's not what I was going to make a comment on. The number one, I'm assuming it's Martin Baker makes the ejection seat. They should probably up their limit.
Aces
free
too.
testing.
Aces
okay.
too.
Well, that's
aces.
That's free test pilot stuff right there. Number two, I had to sign waivers in my career for my weight. I did it of my own free will. I knew the threat, and it was a waiver in my NATOP saying that at times. Okay. So here, the only thing I might have an issue with in this is this guy's obviously very thorough. He's obviously got a
there's
what's that? Well, no, hold on. He's obviously got a bone to pick with this. He knew this stuff beforehand and he used this as his avenue, or he found all this out and was just as shocked as everybody else and is like, whoa, like this is not like a whoopsie. That's a whole command climate thing. And that's his job. The 265 thing, it had nothing to do with the mishap, in my opinion. The guy could fly the plane if he could fit in it. He wasn't low because he was there. And frankly, he made it out. That's the only part where I'm like,
they dinged him because he was the only one that got injured, right, Mover? Like,
right. The big guy got injured. He did not.
Okay, I didn't realize that. So, well, in that case, it should be in there because it is a contributing factor to him getting injured. But that being said, he may very well have had a similar waiver to where he knew he was going to get injured if he did that. So I don't. And again, I have not been in this mishap. But continue. I'm sorry.
So. They go off the scheduling stuff, and then they at the time of the mishap, and this is where we start to get the cultural problem. The director of operations testified that he was focused primarily on administrative office work, despite the deteriorating weather conditions and additional 2 crews attempting to receive a step brief, all while knowing that he had a junior non-instructor pilot performing the Fox 3, which is their top 3/soft duties. Moreover, there was no established procedure to verify the currency despite local guidance. The organizational structure in the 28th OSS fostered inadequate supervision, inability to identify and communicate airfield hazards properly, and the commander's inability to recognize and control risk properly. Most of the squadron's assistant director of operations positions, typically occupied by senior company grade or field grade officers, were unfilled due to high priority missions outside the OSS. Approximately 2 months before the mishap, the weather sensor became degraded and the system would no longer observe prevailing visibility. It went largely unnoticed until the mishap. Shortly after the mishap, actually. Tower had some awareness because of an informal agreement with the weather flight to activate the working sensor during airfield closures, which would eliminate the requirement for periodic manual observations. I find by a preponderance of the evidence revealed an ineffective and unhealthy culture which directly contributed to the mishap. Their overall lack of discipline, like he's repeating himself now, coupled with the OSS ineffective communication, inadequate program management, lack of supervisor oversight, such conditions that allow this mishap to occur by directly leading to the mishap's cause and its 3 non-weather related substantially contributing factors. And then he comes back and says, yeah, and they couldn't fly worth a crap because of CRM and all that stuff. So I guess the thing is, and here's the topic. The comments are entertaining on that video that I did, because, you know, first thing somebody says is, well, it's DEI. And no, that's not Dale Earnhardt Incorporated. That is what diversity, equity, and inclusion. Gonky, we were trying to figure out what it means and whatever. There's nothing in this report that indicates it's anything other than what they said. Like there's no way. However, what is in this report, and I think what you can read into, and we're going to talk about this in other topics, is there is a greater culture in the Air Force of doing more with less, of trying to make things happen when you don't have the conditions, because there's something they don't talk about. And Gonky, you know, you and I kind of talked about this offline. They're not flying much. They've been doing combat operations. They even talk about it in the mishap that they're in a combat footing and they're accepting certain combat risks even in peacetime. The jets are breaking. The jets are old. What did you say, Gonky? They're trying. We can't afford the Air Force that we think we have.
No, exactly. The government can't afford the Air Force they want.
It is a bigger thing. And I talked about this in the mishap video because toxic leadership can ruin an organization. We saw this directly where we were in Florida. Remember day one, Mr. 12 o'clock high, Curtis rolls in and says, you're all a bunch of worthless, entitled 05s.
Literally. I'm an 04, sir, but thanks.
At 6 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, has a commander's call, and that's the first thing he says to us. Yeah. And that set the tone for probably the worst organization I've ever been a part of or seen. And it nearly ended my ability to get a military retirement. Like I just crawled out of that like last week. So yeah, I take that to heart. But the issue here, the greater issue is that we're not flying enough. Our jets are old, and we're not giving people the tools they need to succeed or survive even in this case. I mean, you can say all day long, and I said this, you know, it's basic airmanship, it's basic flying, but why is there a basic airmanship problem? Where is it starting?
Flight school.
Well, the B-1, for one, the B-1, I mean, it's kind of, we like Wombat and I know a B-1 guy, and it's, you know, they start 2 up to make 1.
Well, and that's the thing is you have syllabus waivers, syllabus deviations, you know, the more I do these mishap reports, the more you start piecing it together. The Shaw thing where that poor kid, the seat didn't fire, right? You go back and you're like, ACES 2, seat didn't fire, maintenance screwed him over. Well, if you roll it back, the B course waived his night tanking ride. He had never been to the tanker. And they're like, hey, let's do a night suppression of enemy air defense mission, the most complicated mission we can find. Let's make that the first time you ever try to tank. And it's like, what? With no B? Because Gonky, you know this. What's the difference between a RAG IP and a fleet IP?
Dude, a lot. The RAG IP has to, I mean, you carry a lot more weight, man.
And more comfort, right? Yeah. You're doing this more, like you talked about it when we were talking on the phone. You're getting reps. You know, you're flying twice a day, you know, a couple times a week, and you're getting reps, and you're used to looking at students, and you're used to the common student errors. A combat squadron IP is not the same and is not looking for the same things that will save that kid's life.
Yeah, no, I mean, dude, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. In my mind, when I read through this, number one, 2 flights in 60 days. I mean, that's number one. I don't care who you are. You're flying a B-1, and you know they just didn't take up. You know, they just didn't go from A to B like you do in an airline with autopilot on. They probably had a mission that was, you know, somewhat complex. That's the big one for me. The fact that they started the airplane, it broke 4 hours later. I mean, that's all contributing factors, man, because
100%.
I mean, now the brief's not fresh in your head. You're daydreaming. And for 4 hours, those guys were probably in the bar drinking coffee, shooting the breeze, playing foosball. I mean,
the pack was dropped because they probably didn't assume they were going to go fly at that point.
And exactly. And they were probably like, man, maybe they won't fix the airplane and we'll just go home.
Especially if they've dealt with that in the past, the plane's breaking, right? I mean, that's how your
well, that's the culture of the B-1, right? It's like, hey, let's start 2 to make 1. I mean, that airplane is a maintenance hog, and I love the B-1. I think it's an awesome looking airplane, but it's kind of the nature of the beast, man. When you don't, the worst thing for a flying squadron is not to fly. And so what do? You fill the time with a whole bunch of other stuff. Flying gets put on the back burner, and I can see it when I read this report, man, because I mean, the Navy has had a similar problem, and you got to get these X's done to be green, right? So, it's like you're talking about with the poor kid in the F-16, man. I'm sure somebody was like, this is a pretty push it up mission for this kid, but like, dude, we can get like 8 X's in one flight on this guy, and then he's good for 2 months, whatever. So,
100%.
Yeah, these B-1 guys are thinking the same thing. They're like, dude, we get 2 flights in 60 days. We got to get as many of these X's as possible. Right. I mean, so the focus goes from operational, per the book to, let's get as many of these things done as we can. And, dude, people will do what they have to do to get the mission done. That's how we're wired. We're mission oriented.
100%.
And you get inverse mission creep, right? Instead of, hey, what will give us the best training? Like you talk about, Gonky, they had 80,000 pounds of gas and their divert was Tinker. Right. But then you start thinking, well, if we divert, this jet's going to be, it's overnight. Maintenance is going to it's not going to be available for the morning go tomorrow. There's going to be other stuff, because when you have abundance, it doesn't matter. When dude, when I was flying, I always go back to the time I flew, 27 BFM sorties in a month. Dude, it was like, we don't have enough people to fly the sorties that maintenance is generating. Like, we were feast. But then you flip to famine at like VFA 204 when we had 1 jet. Right. Then it's like, what can we possibly do to stretch this one airplane to keep people current so we're not doing waivers? And that is where, you start going, well, if we can just get this one more counter, and maybe we'll do a look-see approach. Well, that's not legal, but we're going to try, we'll divert, we'll go around. Go-arounds are free. We'll go around.
And for quitters.
But hey, don't divert, because there's 4 other dudes that are supposed to get their X's in that jet today, dude. So bring her back.
Well, so I'd have to look, dude. I think if it wasn't nighttime, it was close. 5:45 in the evening on January 4th. That's got to be.
It's got to be dark up there. Yeah.
Dark in the fog.
Yeah.
And cold. Ugh.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I think that probably this dissection of the culture and the B-1 culture, it would not surprise me if you looked around the Air Force and found it in a lot more places.
Because not just the Air Force.
Exactly.
The military.
Exactly.
Everywhere. And not just aviation.
No.
We've been doing this crap for years, man. This isn't news. So Mover, I ask you this. Do you applaud this guy for writing it this way? Did I put you on spot?
I don't know the context.
Okay.
So that's what I would be curious about, because from people who have contacted me, ironically, it's crazy when you get emails like immediately. The
wouldn't have that problem. So.
My Lord is a stand-up 06 like bomber guy in this community. It's a small community. Everybody knows everybody.
Sure.
So from the people, they're like, if he's bringing it up, it's real. Mm-hmm. So there's that aspect to it. I'm not a huge fan of airing dirty laundry in public through an AIB, especially since it's arguable whether it was causal. Like, because, when you're AIB, it's just like writing a police report. You stick to the facts. You don't start going off on these tangents of, well, this was this and this and this. Like you can go back to what he had for breakfast that day and say, he was in a bad mood. But he could have just stuck to, sync rate, cross-check, CRM, and nobody checked the NOTAM, and it could have been a 25-page report instead of a 69-page report. However, if this is like the good dude, like, because Gonky, you and I know some really good 06s and some really good stand-up 06s, just as like we know some really bad ones. But if it's one of the good ones that's like, nobody's listening to me, and if I don't put this in writing, like, I can't sleep at night.
Dude, it
then
might
I'm like,
be his,
you know what?
It's his hill to die on.
Well, yeah, it might be his opportunity to fix his community.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
That was what I was wondering. Is I'm like, if this dude's a good dude, which just with that last name, I'm gonna say is above average. Maybe it's literally like he's been beating this drum and nobody has said or done anything because of the politics and leadership. And he goes, you know what? I tried to tell you, dummies, and you didn't listen. So guess what? Now everybody's going to listen. Because I'll tell you, when this came out, the old fighter pilots on the FB went ballistic on this mishap report. The old guys, right? I don't know if you saw that or not, Gonky, but those old dudes that judge, everything that Mover talks about, they went ballistic on this. And
is this,
and they
weren't old fighter pilot? Is it the old fighter pilot
group?
Facebook group?
And they were like, culture, blah, blah, blah. So like, there was a lot of stuff that for me, I'm like, dude, maybe this is just a situation where this guy, this was his shot. He's tried everything else. Let's be honest. You don't make 06 if you're firing these shots across the bow as your first avenue, right? Like, you know how to play the game. You know how to use the chain of command. You know how to do it the right way. So likely I'm going to assume that was all done. And he wasn't getting the response. He knew, it would not surprise me if this guy for years has been saying, dude, we're going to crash a plane. Like, we keep doing this, we're going to crash a plane. Hey guys, if we keep doing this, we're going to kill people. We're going to eject people. We're going to crash a plane. And then it happens and he goes, I mean, we've all been there on different levels in our career where you're like, dude, I called this. Like, what? Yeah. Why is nobody listening? So maybe this was just his.
He called out.
And you know what? If it was, I applaud him for having the cojones to do it. Honestly,
we called out enough people, man. I mean, he's probably going to stop at lieutenant colonel.
He's a colonel. No, this is colonel.
He's probably going to stop at colonel.
Well, you know what? Some of us have stopped at 04 and it's perfectly fine. So I have no problem with the rank structure. I like somebody who's willing to say, I mean, but again, I see your side too, Mover. There's a very good point of like, hey man, like you kind of kept going. Like you made your case. You had a strong enough case. We didn't need to also fat shame the dude and talk about the guy's gloves. But again, if he's building a case, it's like,
Well, his case. He's building the case of an extreme lack of professionalism,
like an egregious lack of safety and leadership.
But Gonky, allegedly, as well as I do, some of that stuff is just the way.
Oh yeah, I never wear gloves.
No,
ever. I like to feel the buttons, man. The way I always think about it is I probably get shot down because I can't feel the buttons. But if I don't have gloves,
and get shot down. To Wombat, your point, that is some of the issue I have with it, is because there's some stuff that's like 100% valid and like you need to bring this up. But then there's some stuff and it's like, and then, and you're like, dude, all right, now you're just nitpicking because you ask them, you did okay, what's the deviation for the standard if your density altitude is?
Well, dude, but remember, the people that do these mishaps they're not professional writers, right? There's no training writing wise in doing this. So you got to give the guy a little bit of benefit of the doubt on that a little bit too, because it's easy.
He passed ACSC, so he had to have written like
I don't know what that papers. Is that kindergarten?
That's nerd school to become an 06. Like he has gone through Air Command and Staff College, Air War College. Somebody has had the opportunity to tell him what a run-on sentence is and how to break things up into paragraphs by now.
Yeah, but as well as I do, when you get passionate about something, it's very easy to just keep going.
Oh, I know.
I do it all the time on your show.
I know. I've wanted things with 27 pages. I'm aware.
It was a nearly $500 million airplane. I mean, he's probably thinking, I better cover everything.
Potentially, because it's a national asset too. And we had that in the Hawkeye, you're in a different world when you're flying a national asset. Like that's a different animal because of how much
a national asset.
Dude, it's $500 million airplane.
Yeah, it has to be. The B-1 has to be.
The mishap was $500 million. I think that's including, I don't think the airplane. How much is a B-1?
$400,000 apparently.
Aircraft. Hold on.
That's it.
I mean, it only destroyed like a couple of lights, right?
317 million is how much one is.
Where'd the other 100 million come from?
All the things.
Well, the ejection seat.
That's part of the airplane. It comes with the
okay.
airplane. It's like, dude.
All right. Let's move on.